Hello everyone and welcome to Byjus Exam Prep IAS. Today we are going to have a discussion on 2nd March 2024, the Hindu newspaper. But before we begin, a quick announcement for all of you that today we are going to have a live session at 6 p.m. where Rohit sir will be with you and he will help you and guide you with regards to how to prepare for Civil Services Examination 2025. So do attend the session, please mark the session so that you can be there on time and get all the guidance that you need for this examination. So let's begin. The very first thing we'll need to understand, we'll see what are the important articles for today's newspaper. Now first, when we look at all these articles, there are 5 articles that I've taken which will need some kind of detailed analysis and are more crucial from your mains perspective. So these are the 5 articles. First, you have this article on page number 4. Unrestrained poaching plays big role in decline of Odisha's leopard. So there is a leopard report, status report that has been published, and this is based on that. Then decoding the script, which is based on genome editing. We'll try to understand that. Then change and continuity in India's Palestine policy. We'll understand what is exactly the policy about, and what exactly are the changes that we are looking at from India's perspective. With China out, Indian firm to build Sri Lanka power project. So this is again something with regards to balancing of power, you can say in a manner, in Indian Ocean region. And then to establish India to establish international alliance to protect big cats. So again we'll have an understanding of what exactly do we see here and how are the things shaping up. And then there are 4 important topics from prelims perspective, smaller areas, where we'll discuss about the schemes for particularly vulnerable tribal, and then after that we have the US drone sales to India, and we'll discuss about what exactly is this drone and basics to it. Then one small concept related to El Nino, one update with regards to it, and then there are new contracts or deals that have been signed in defense. So these are the things that we are going to discuss from the perspective of the prelims examination. Now let's begin with our first topic, and this is on page number 4, and this topic is about the Indian leopards. Unrestrained poaching plays big role in decline of Odisha's leopards. Now although this article talks mainly about Odisha and the leopard population decline that we have seen in Odisha, but there is this report that has been published and there are various aspects of the report that becomes very crucial for us from examination perspective. So we'll try to understand all these aspects of what the report talks about, what are the key findings of the report, and then we'll go beyond this write-up and we'll try to understand some of the basics related to it. The context to this article is this. The article says that between 2018 and 2022, Odisha's leopard population has declined by approximately 1/4, that is by 25%. Now this is due to many different reasons. Now what the article says is that there is the status of leopards of India report that highlights a significant drop in leopard numbers significantly in Odisha. Sorry. Now from this perspective, what we see is that what the report says is that the last time when the estimation was done, the number was at 760, which has now degraded to 568. So the numbers have dropped, is what it says. Now overall, when you look at some of the key findings that we see in this particular report, we see that there are state-wise reports also that have been published, although not every state and every number is important in this particular area, but there are certain figures like these. So for example, let's say the estimation of the number stands at 13,874, and in this particular scenario, when we compare it to the last time, that is 2018 report, it stood at 12,852. So you can say that there has been some increase in the number or in the population of leopards in India. Apart from that, region wise, when we see, it has listed that in region wise, when we look at, there are some areas which have shown growing population. Then there are some areas where we also have seen that there have been some decline. So for example, when we look at the central Indian areas, we see that there has been a slightly growing population of leopards from between 2018 to 2022. And then when we look at the Shivalik Hills and the Gangetic Plains, there we see that there has been a decline in the number. The largest population of the leopards that has been reported in this particular survey is in Madhya Pradesh, where we see that the numbers are the highest, and then followed by Maharashtra, Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. So these are some of the things that have been mentioned in this particular report. Now the article says that overall when we look at leopard densities, the leopard densities actually have increased in the areas where we have tiger reserves. So that suggests that wherever you are making conservation efforts, they are effective and they are able to protect these leopards in these areas. But so that's why, especially when you look at some of the protected areas like the Similipal and the Satkosia Tiger Reserve that you have in Odisha, they have seen that these are the areas where we have seen good numbers. But apart from that, what we see is that in other areas the numbers have declined. And more importantly, when it comes to why the numbers have declined, they have talked about some of the reasons. For example, they have talked about poaching for bush meat, for even tiger and leopard skins. And apart from that, habitat loss has been one of the major problems. Habitat loss because of mining, because of road accidents, and because there are major threats that actually come because of all these areas. So all these things. So for example, these things we see that they become very crucial for us to understand. Overall, there is a number that has been also published. The number says that there have been more than 116 such leopards that have been killed only for their skin between 2018 to 2022. So that's why the report emphasizes on all these areas, and it also talks about the need for increasing the action from the state perspective, whether it is in patrolling, whether it is in prey recovery, or even in the management of the habitat. So there are, and especially when it comes to outside the tiger reserves. So that's why it becomes very crucial for us to understand these of some of these areas. Apart from that, it also talks about the role of special task force and says that the role of the special task force should be pretty highlighted, and they should also ensure that they are working well with the state police initially, and especially it is very, very important to understand what are the problem areas and where police and the special task force, etc., they can come together and they can actually try to solve the problem. So there are all these things that have been mentioned in this particular article. Now with regards to the report that was published, there was a state-wise data also that was published, although it is not really important for you, as the only things that will be important would be the areas that have shown the highest distribution. So where we talked about the states of Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra, Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. So these are the areas which become significantly important because they are the areas which have shown significant population of leopards. Now overall, because we are talking about leopards, there are few things that you should know from the perspective of prelims and mains examination. Now when we talk about Indian leopard, we know that Indian leopard is distributed across variety of forest habitats in many of the countries. For example, in India, in Nepal, Bhutan, parts of Pakistan. So these are the areas where we see that they are actually found, and only, I mean, if let's say when you consider areas like Pakistan, you have to exclude the mangrove forest and the desert habitats. These are the areas where they are not found. Apart from that, what we see is that it is also listed in Schedule 1 of Wildlife Protection Act of 1972 in India and has been classified as vulnerable by the IUCN Red List. So although we see that despite they are listed in these kind of lists, we still see that leopard population has been facing significant threats, and this is from various different aspects, whether it is about habitat loss or fragmentation of habitat, or human wildlife conflicts have been a very significant problem, poaching has been a problem, illegal trade has been a problem. So there are all these aspects where we see that leopards have been facing some kind of issue or the other. Because we have to understand that leopards actually occupy a very prominent position in the trophic parameters when you talk about the food chain, the various levels of various trophic levels that you have, alongside tigers or lions and all these kind of big cats, they also play a very significant role in maintaining a particular habitat. So that's why they are very crucial in this particular scenario. Apart from that, what we also see is that they play a very important role as one of the top predators in these kind of areas. Similarly, we have to understand their ecological advantage as well. But what we see is that uh, their adaptability very often leads to conflicts with humans as well, and that's why it plays a very significant challenge to the conservation of these animals. Overall, what we see is that the global population and the distribution of these leopards have been declining, and there are various anthropogenic factors that are leading to their decrease in population. So we'll try to understand what are these primary concerns, where do we see the areas of the problem areas. So first thing that you have to understand is the major problem of poaching. Now when it comes to poaching, poaching has been one of the most problematic situation for leopards, because poaching for various different purposes such as bushmeat, for traditional medicine, for illegal wildlife trade, it remains a very significant threat to the leopard population. Leopards are very, you can say, very often hunted for their skins, for their bones, for other body parts which are very highly valued in the illegal market. So that's why we have to understand that they are being poached for variety of their reasons, whether it is about their skins or bones or other body parts, or even for meat or even traditional medicine. There are all these things. So the poaching that happens, poaching happens for their meat, for traditional medicine, then their skin, their bones, so, and even other body parts as well. So that's why we see that they actually become widely hunted in this particular scenario. So that's why we need to understand their situation, and that's why we have to understand that for us also why it becomes very crucial to have habits where we are not inculcating these habits, where we are buying these leather clothes or leather made products or articles for which they would be hunted. If there is no demand from the market, there would be no supply requirement. But unfortunately, because there is a demand in the illegal market, hence there is a supply as well. So that's why we have to understand that where do the leopard prints look good. They only look good on leopards, not in your handbag. So poaching has been one of the issues. Then one of the major problem also has been habitat loss and fragmentation, where we have seen that rapid urbanization, agricultural expansion and industrial development also has led to the habitat loss and fragmentation, depriving these leopards of their natural habitats and reduce their prey base. So that's why we have to understand these aspects. So this basically comes from rapid urbanization, then agriculture, all right, urbanization, agriculture, then there are various different developmental activities. For example, industrial expansion or industrial development also leads to it. So I'll write this also, industries also lead to it. Then construction of roads and railways also lead to this problem. So that's why there are all these construction activities which can cause problems for them. Then the problem of human wildlife conflict. Increasing conflict between humans and leopards due to encroachment into the leopard habitats, competition for the resources, and even killing uh, of the leopards for various different reasons. It poses a very serious threat to the leopard population. Leopards very often they feed on livestock as well, and that also leads to conflict between humans and leopards. So that's why we need to understand human wildlife conflict in this particular scenario. And especially when it comes to leopard habitats, we have seen that if you go back into history also, and you will see that for hundreds of years leopards have been living in these kind of areas, that there have been cases of conflicts. But one thing that has to be noted in this particular scenario is that leopards, generally you will see that the the leopards will not be really going after human lives, or they would not be attacking humans a lot. There have been very significantly low number of such cases where there has been a conflict where leopards have attacked humans, because they have been predators which also try to stay away from humans. They try to stay away from any kind of conflict, and very often that's why they'll try not to go after human population, and they'll not pose a threat for human population. So although the belief would be something else because of the fear that we have of all these predators, but when you look at their habitats and how their habitats function and how they behave in these kind of habitats, you'll see that they are not the ones who are causing the problems. Actually, we are the ones who are encroaching into their areas, and that's why sometimes there is a retaliation that we see from them. Otherwise, it's not that they are the ones who are actively going after humans or causing harm to humans. So that's why we have to understand where this conflict comes from. The conflict basically comes because we are encroaching into their habitats, correct? So this is basically because of encroachment. This is mainly because of the encroachment that we see into, sorry, minor spelling mistake, encroachment into leopard habitats, right? Encroachment into leopard habitats is a serious problem. And then there is where you look at competition for resources, so that becomes an issue. Competition for resources. And then sometimes because of livestock, because leopard might want to feed on the livestock and might try to kill the livestock, and that also becomes one of the challenges because of which conflicts between the communities and leopards can happen. Then decline in the prey species. Overall, what we have seen is that decline in prey species population due to overhunting, due to habitat loss, and also due to depletion of the natural resources has been affecting the survival of the leopards as well. And because these leopards, they rely on the diverse range of the prey subsistence, so that also leads to a lot of problems. Similarly, we have seen that there has been an issue of illegal wildlife trade. The illegal trade in leopard skins, bones and other body parts, it drives poaching and further problem in the decline, leading to the decline of the leopard population. So the demand for the leopard products, especially in also traditional medicine and in the luxury markets, that also fuels the trade. So that's why we have to understand these problems. And overall, another problem, if I have to add, I would say that there has been a lack of effective conservation methods. So that also has been an issue. We have seen that not very adequate enforcement of wildlife protection laws have happened, insufficient funding for the conservation efforts, and very limited awareness among the community also which are involved in the conservation activities. It all contributes to the decline of the population in leopards, or especially in case of, let's say, Indian leopards. So that's why we need to understand that there are all these issues that we are facing currently, and conservation of these wildlife becomes very, very crucial, especially when it comes to leopards which know how to live peacefully with humans. They will be around, they will be living in these kind of areas which are also somehow being inhabited by humans, but they very rarely would come into conflict with humans. They have adapted to this, they have adapted to living peacefully with humans and among the human population. So that's why it becomes very crucial for us to understand that their conservation becomes crucial in this particular aspect. And that is why, I mean, this is a cartoon that was published by Green Humor, who has he has been one of the best, I would say, in India with regards to cartoons published on environmental issues. Very often publishes in the Hindu also, and has his own website where you will find all these various different cartoons. A wonderful website to follow. Just in case you are interested, you can go to greenhumor.com and you can actually look at all these various aspects of various conservation efforts and also various issues related to the environment and wildlife. Anyway, now coming to the conservation efforts and what are we doing with regards to conservation of leopards. First and foremost, we see that there have been certain initiatives that have been taken by the government of India. First, you can say, is Project Leopard, which was launched by the government of India, and this becomes very, very important because it focuses on the conservation and management, especially when it comes to tailoring to the needs of leopard population. Involves the management of the habitat, anti-poaching methods, or the community awareness and engagement of the communities as well. Research also, so that you can ensure long-term survival of leopards. So there are all these efforts that have been made as a part of Project Leopard. Similarly, we see that there are corridor conservations that are being done. Organizations such as Wildlife Trust of India, for example, they work on identifying the resources that are required for wildlife corridors so that they can facilitate the movement of the leopards and the other wildlife between the fragmented habitats. Because you have to understand one of the issues that comes in the conservation efforts. Suppose that there was a habitat like this, all right, and now there is a road construction that happens through that. Suppose that this is a wildlife sanctuary or a national park, and there is a road that has been constructed through it. So because of this road construction, now what happens is that this habitat gets fragmented into two habitats now. So even because there will be a lot of vehicles, etc., which will be running probably at high speed through these roads, the animals will also be afraid, and that's why they'll not try to cross through the roads. So in that case, what happens is that a big habitat now has been distributed to two habitats, and this becomes a major challenge for the survival of any wildlife species, especially for the predator species. It becomes very, very difficult. So that's why there needs to be some corridors, and this is where we see that conservation through making these corridors so that you can facilitate the movement of the leopards and other wildlife between the fragmented habitats becomes very, very crucial. So that's why the role of organizations such as Wildlife Trust of India becomes crucial. Then at the same time, we have seen that there have been various programs. For example, projects such as the Tarai Arc Landscape Program has been very, very important, and it tries to restore and protect the very crucial corridors for the leopards in the Tarai region. So that's why Tarai Arc Landscape Program, you can say, is another such effort. Tarai Arc Landscape Program. So this also has been a very, very important program in ensuring the conservation and making the corridors available in the Tarai region in India. Similarly, conservation, breeding and reintroduction. We have seen that we have tried, even in this particular scenario, where we have tried many things for in case of leopard conservation, and reintroduction programs have been also focused upon that in the zoos or in, let's say, the zoological parks or these kind of controlled environments, they would be conserved well, and then once they are healthy enough to go back into their natural surroundings, they will be sent back. So that's why here we see that organizations such as Wildlife Institute of India becomes very, very crucial, because it conducts research on captive breeding techniques and also reproduction of these leopards, and then after that the reintroduction protocols for leopards are also taken into account. So that's why we have seen that there have been various instances here. So that's why the role of Wildlife Institute of India becomes important here. Wildlife Institute of India plays a very, very important role. And then after that, we have seen that there have been certain leopard reintroduction projects as well. For example, in Siriska Tiger Reserve. So in Siriska Tiger Reserve, there was a leopard reintroduction program which was aimed to restore the leopard population in the areas where they have become locally extinct. So that's why they have been reintroduced into those kind of areas. Similarly, in case of research and monitoring also, we see that the role of the government or role of the NGOs becomes very, very crucial. Whether it is about the field surveys or camera traps or genetic analysis, these are the things that become very, very crucial in understanding what is causing the problem, what is leading to the decline in population, and hence they can move simultaneously in this particular scenario. So that's why in this scenario you can say this can be about field surveys, camera traps, genetic analysis. All these things actually help in the conservation efforts. Then policy advocacy and the legal measures. We have seen that there are various different aspects also here where we see that stronger wildlife protection laws and policies are being implemented to combat the poaching and illegal wildlife trade. They also have tried to provide support to the law enforcement agencies in investigating the wildlife crimes and also prosecuting the offenders in this particular scenario. Similarly, awareness campaigns and education also helps. Whether the role of government or the NGOs is very significant in this. There have been programs in ensuring that leopard, especially in the leopard range areas, to raise the awareness about the importance of leopard conservation and the ecological role that the leopards play. At the same time, there is a need for communication in these kind of communities as well, so that they can be active participants in the conservation efforts. So that's why we see that there are all these things that can be done in ensuring the conservation of leopards, and hence we see that this becomes a very crucial aspect in conservation. So overall, because this report just has come out, it becomes an important report, and hence these are some of the areas related to the report that can become important. Now the next topic is decoding the script. Now this again is something which is based on another discussion that we did a few days back, and this is about the genome sequencing that has been completed in India. Now, although I am sure that this already has been discussed once, but still we'll go through the brief overview of what has happened here. So we are talking about the Genome India project. Now this Genome India project, funded and coordinated by the Department of Biotechnology, successfully sequenced genomes of 10,000 Indian individuals. So this is basically the overview of the project that has happened, that here we have seen that 10,000 Indian individuals genomes have been sequenced. Now there are various aspects to it. We'll try to understand what exactly do we mean by genome sequencing and what is the implication of the same. So overall we see that this entire effort, according to Government of India, is aimed at creating a reference Indian human genome to serve as foundation resource for genetic research and healthcare improvements. Then overall, when you look at the history of such efforts, you'll see that the first human genome sequencing in India was done back in 2006. And then after that, in the current scenario, we see that sequencing of 10,000 Indian genomes have been done. Now overall, when we look at this project, just understand a few things with regards to what are we doing. Here we are talking about genome sequencing. Now genome sequencing basically is the process of determining the exact sequence of the nucleotides that we have in the genes, and that will be within any organism's genome. Now overall, when we talk about a genome, just understand this, that DNA, this word that you have right here, DNA basically is related to the specific characteristics that any individual has, or any organism for that matter has. So anything that we have, let's say any specific characteristic that any one of us also have, that also comes from the DNA. For example, something as simple as the color of the eye or color of the skin, or how much hair will be left on the forehead. All these things are determined by DNA. So that's why these are all genetically determined things. Now, when it comes to genome sequencing involves reading of the various arrangements of the the bases, the chemical bases that we have, and that's why it will help us in various different aspects. So just try to understand what exactly are we doing with regards to genome sequencing and how does genome sequencing help. So genome sequencing, in this particular scenario, when we talk about genome sequencing, we know that it is the process of determining the exact sequence of the nucleotides that we have in terms of DNA or RNA in an organism's genome. So that's why we see that we try to do the exact arrangement, understand the exact arrangement of all the chemical bases that we have. Now overall what we see is that there are multiple aspects of this genome sequencing. First and foremost, it will be about extracting of the DNA from the cells of an organism. So first the extraction of the cells will be done. Then after that the sequencing will be done. Using various different technologies that are there for genome sequencing, we try to read the sequence of the nucleotides. And once we have been able to do that, then the assembly is done. We try to understand the genome sequence or the DNA sequence, and then after that we try to arrange them according to what we have found. So overall we see that there are all these processes that are involved in genome sequencing. Now this leads to a lot of advantages. First can be disease diagnosis and treatment. Here what we see is that we can actually make precise medicines. It will enable us to develop personalized medicine, and they will be based on strategies which first will look into the genome makeup, that is what the genes of an individual is like, and then improving the treatment efficacy according to the genetic makeup. So that's why it helps us in making effective medicines. It helps us in making effective medicines. Alright, because, and you would have seen that if you go and read on the internet also, you'll see that not, let's say if there is a particular medicine that is effective on Indian population, it is not necessary that the same medicine will also be effective on European public or maybe people of the US and South America. So we see that there are, because there are genetic variations. So although it has been seen to be very effective with very high efficacy on Indian population, the same medicine or the same vaccine may not have the same effect on population of other parts of the world. So because of the genes, and that's why making precise medicines, making effective medicines is possible with the help of genome sequencing. So that's why it will help us in making genome precise medicine or effective medicines. Then it will also help us in understanding genetic disorders. It basically helps in diagnosing the genetic disorders and what exactly are the issues happening, and we would be more accurate in understanding of the genetic diseases. So that's why it also helps in better understanding and diagnostics related to genetic diseases. Alright, so that's why they will help there also. So overall, when it comes to understanding of the genetic diseases, also understand what are the various ways in which they help us. They basically provide insights into the genetic basis of the disease, and that's why they would contribute to the development of new treatments and preventive strategies. So that's why they will help in understanding of the genetic diseases. Similarly, they also help in drug development. They would facilitate the development or discovery of new drugs that target the development specifically of drugs which until now we could not make. Let's say associated with diseases where we do not really have any medicine available or any drug available yet. So we'll see that there also it would have significant impact. So that's why it will help in drug development. So there are two concepts, or there are two, you can say, areas of biotechnology which become very crucial here. The names can be important. Here we are talking about pharmacogenomics, this is related to pharmacogenomics, and then here we are talking about biopharmaceutics. So these two become very, very crucial with regards to genome sequencing and how they would have a positive impact because of genome sequencing. Then in cancer research also, we see that it will play a big role. Genome sequencing of cancer cells can reveal mutations that drive cancer, and that's why it will lead to targeting of the therapy options, and that's why it will also help in identifying the biomarkers for cancer, and that's why better treatment responses can be developed with regards to cancer. Similarly, in case of agriculture, it helps us in improving the crop and the livestock breeding also, and that's why when we look at genome sequencing which goes beyond humans, we see that this is where it will have multi-segmented advantages for us, and that is where we see that in agriculture also it might play a very very important role. It will help us in understanding disease resistance, it can help us in improving the yield or the productivity of the crops. So that's why there are all these things where in agriculture also it can help. So it can help us in improving productivity, it will help us in improving productivity and fight diseases. Then we see that in case of evolutionary biology also it plays a very very important role. It provides insights into the evolutionary history and the relationships between the species, and at the same time also helps us in understanding of the genetic changes that have occurred over time, and that's why they contribute to the diversity in the species. So we can understand all these things with regards to the same. So that's why it helps us in understanding the diversity in the species, diversity in species. Then in case of microbial genomics also it plays a major role. Here what we see is that it will be able to enhance the understanding of the microbiomes and the role that the microorganisms play in the health, diseases and environmental processes. It also helps in the identification and characterization of all the pathogens, and hence also helps us in improving the outbreak or understanding the outbreak responses, and also how the public health measures can be taken effectively. Then in case of forensic science also it plays a major role, where we see that it helps us in improving the accuracy of the identification in the individuals, especially when it comes to crime investigations, and then also helps us in identification in cases of disaster victims as well. And then finally it also helps us in conservation genetics. So here we are talking about how it can assist in conservation of especially the endangered species or critically endangered species by understanding their genetic diversity and the population structure. So that's why we see that there are various different ways in which we can see how genome sequencing can help. The first four that you see is largely related to how it helps humans, and then after that we see that beyond humans also it can play a major role. So that's why there are some advantages that we directly have as humans, and there are some advantages that other animals and plants would also have because of genome sequencing. So overall there is one project that becomes very crucial in this entire context of what we are discussing, and this is called as the Human Genome Project. Now this Human Genome Project was a groundbreaking international scientific research with primary goal of mapping and understanding of all the genes of human species, collectively known as the genome. So here what we tried as a part of the Human Genome Project was, what we did here was we tried to understand and started the mapping and understanding of all the genes of the human species. This project was launched back in 1990 and was completed in 2003. So overall it spanned over 13 years, and a lot of countries came together and became a part of this Human Genome Project. But just note that India was not a part of Human Genome Project. Initially we were about to become a part, but we did not eventually become a part of the Human Genome Project. So overall this is what we know about the Human Genome Project. The basic objective was to determine the sequence of almost 3 billion chemical base pairs that make up the human DNA, and to identify and map the approximately 20,000 to 25,000 genes that the human body has. So overall this is basically what the objective was, and then we see that there was a collaboration involving scientists from various different countries and various different institutions, and they all came together and they contributed to this particular project. You can say one of the criticisms of India has been that India did not become a part of the initial Human Genome Project. We did not realize the advantages that we have out of this kind of a project. So that is basically where we see that this exactly was the Human Genome Project. Now coming to the next article on page number 6, that is the editorial page, and this is related to international relations. Change and continuity in India's Palestine policy. Now here I wouldn't say that this article directly is very important, but it has laid down a lot of things that India has been doing in the past few months. And overall it talks about whether there is a shift in India's policy, whether we have shifted towards one side, or how we used to have a very balanced approach between Israel and Palestine. Has that changed for India, or are we now supporting more, or are we tilting more towards Israel? Is that the case in case of India? So it lays down the entire history of what has been happening until now, so, and what India has been doing in the past few months. So overall, from the that's why the context of this article is this, that it highlights India's evolving stance on Israel-Palestine issue, balancing historic support for Palestine with strategic interest and diplomatic considerations. Now overall, when it comes to this article, because we have been talking about this a lot over the past few months, since October at least, we have constantly been talking about Israel-Palestine issue, and we actually already have seen a lot of things with regards to what has happened until now. So overall, what we know is that India historically supported Palestine, the Palestine cause, while also trying to foster the ties with Israel, where we have seen that we have tried to balance, maintain a balance between the two, despite there are so many things that have been happening all across. So overall, what we see is that although there has been a big history here, recent developments are different. Recently, what we have seen is that after the after the Hamas attack on Israel, Prime Minister Modi had expressed solidarity with Israel, and he signaled kind of potentially a shift in India's policy. And what we also saw after that was that India abstained from UN vote on Gaza ceasefire, citing lack of condemnation of the attack on Israel. So overall, when we look at what has happened in India, you'll see that there is a long history to what India has done in this particular scenario, going back to 1947, 48, and then 1950s, and what has happened since, you can say, 1992, where we have had a stronger bond with Israel since 1992. So overall, we have seen that, and then there are new aspects what has happened since the new conflict again started since October. Now overall, when it comes to, that's why we have to understand what India's approach has been in this entire scenario. When you look back into the historical context, in 1947, India, along with Pakistan and all the Arabian countries, we saw the entire Arab bloc, they voted against the UN resolution to partition Palestine. And then in 1950, India recognized Israel but did not establish any full diplomatic relations with Israel. That only happened in 1992. In 1992, India established full diplomatic relations with Israel, and then, but all the while, it also kept on maintaining its support for Palestine. So historically, these three years become important in India's context. That in 1947 we voted against the resolution to partition Palestine. So 1947 that happened. Then after that, in 1950, again we see that India recognized Israel but did not establish any diplomatic relations, and that is something that only got established in 1992. And then after that, we have seen that after the recent events, we have seen that there have been certain shifts that are hinted by India in its policy. So overall, when it comes to, let's say, when we talk about the recent events, you know that on October 7th, Hamas attacked on Israel, and that resulted in very significant civilian casualties. But then after that, on October 26th, there was a vote, and India abstained from UN vote on Gaza ceasefire and said that there hasn't been enough, there are not a lot of nations who have condemned the attack on Israel in this vote, and that's why India said that we are going to abstain from voting. And then after that, in November, December, we saw that there were series of UN votes regarding the Israel-Palestine issue, including the resolution on settlements or ceasefire or Palestine's self-determination. So all these have been happening since November, December. And then after that, when we look at India's actions, although India expressed solidarity with Israel after the October 7th attack, India maintained a balance in its approach by abstaining from UN vote on Gaza ceasefire. And overall, what the analysis in this particular article says is that India's voting record at the UN post the attack suggests a continuation of its balanced approach, supporting the resolution condemning Israel settlements and also calling for ceasefire and also for Palestine's self-determination. So that's why we have seen that overall we have still been trying to balance out this entire scenario. So that's why we have to understand that although it looks like there is a policy shift, we have been trying to support Israel on certain things, but at the same time we have to understand that there is a significant approach that India has been using all the while by not really taking one side or the other. And this is a scenario where we also need to understand India's role, because very often we keep talking about how India's role is very, very crucial when it comes to the global south. The global south basically meaning all the countries which are not really very developed. So that's why they are called as global south. And global south basically is a line also that you have where you'll see that you exclude the European countries and the North American countries and Australia, and then after that all the other countries are seen as global south. So India has been trying to become a leader of the global south, and now here is where we see the conflict, because what we have seen is that overall when you look at other countries of the global south, where you have South Africa or let's say Brazil, or the approach that has been taken by countries like Pakistan or Bangladesh, here we see that they have shown their complete support to Palestine, whereas India as a nation has been trying to maintain a balance. So that's why we have seen that India's support for Palestine cause is rooted in its tangible national interest, and that also includes its determination, or let's say aspiration to lead the global south. So concerns about the civilian casualties in Gaza have been expressed by India's External Affairs Minister also, and that also reflects India's moral stance that has been taken on this conflict. Then at the same time, India's strategic interest in the region, including the economic and the geopolitical considerations, further the influence of its approach to the Israel-Palestine situation becomes very, very crucial to understand. In essence, India's approach has been characterized by a very balanced act between the strategic interests that India has in the region and the diplomatic engagements also at the same time that India has with Israel. Despite expressing all the solidarity with Israel, India maintained a nuanced stance in this particular scenario and continued to advocate for negotiating a solution for this to this particular conflict. And then here we also saw was that India also has been supporting the resolutions at the UN that align with the principles and the interest of India. So that's why we have seen that India has been taking an approach where you cannot really say that India has been tilting on one side or the other, has been trying to maintain a balance between both these sides. Now coming to another article, again related to international relations, with China out, Indian firm to build Sri Lanka power project. Now the context to this particular article is this, that India is implementing a hybrid power project in 3 islands in Sri Lanka, and overall there has been an 11 million grant 3 years after objecting to Chinese energy project in these nearby areas. So overall what we have seen is that in this context the article basically talks about the various aspects of what India has been doing especially in the areas of Sri Lanka which are near India. India has been implementing a hybrid power project in these 3 islands which are near the Jaffna island in Sri Lanka. And overall when it comes to this, understand the signatories, that here what we see is that there is a signature, or you can say an MOU which has been signed between the Sri Lankan ministry, that is the Sustainable Energy Authority in Sri Lanka, and then there is an Indian company called as the U Solar Clean Energy Solution. All right, the name of the company is U Solar Clean Energy Solutions. Now they have signed a contract for the project, and when it comes to this project, there are various aspects of what will be taken care of by this project. First, there will be a hybrid renewable energy system that will be built by them, and overall they are looking at a plant where they will be looking at almost a 530 kilowatt wind power plus solar power plant of almost 1700 kilowatt, and then also a battery power also is being developed by this. So overall, this is what this particular company will be doing in Sri Lanka. So there are three projects, one related to wind energy, one related to solar energy, and then one related to battery technology. So this is what will be done by this particular company. Now overall, what we have seen is that initially a Chinese company was selected for the renewable energy projects in these islands, but we see that India had raised concerns with regards to these areas, and India also offered a grant instead of a loan to Sri Lanka, and this is where we see that a shift started to come. And overall, back in 2022, an MOU was signed between India and Sri Lanka, and this is where we saw that India started taking over these kind of projects. So overall, we also have seen that China also has reacted to these kind of situations, and they have also criticized what is happening between India and Sri Lanka. But for us, that doesn't matter. It is very, very important for India to understand the importance of the Indian Ocean region, and whatever we can do to enter the Indian Ocean region and expand our influence in this particular area. India has been working actively to counter the Chinese influence in the Indian Ocean region, and this has been through various different combinations of diplomatic relationships or economic and the military and the strategic initiatives that India has taken in these kind of areas. So some of the, if you look at this particular area, this is the Indian Ocean region that we are speaking of, and overall when you see this, you have the African and the Middle Eastern countries, then you have the South Asia, and you then have the East Asian and the Pacific nations, which become a part of this entire area. So that's why it becomes important for India to establish better relationships with all these countries, because it also has a very significant it has a big significance for India. It has a big significance for India's security and presence in the maritime areas of this particular region. So that's why we see that there are various approaches that India has been using. So if you try to understand what have been India's approaches here, so first we have seen that there are various strategic partnerships and alliances that India has built in this particular area. So with all these, many of these key Indian Ocean region countries, whether it is through defense cooperation or through maritime security cooperation or economic cooperations, we have seen that we have been trying to do all that. So that's one thing that we have tried to do to have a good influence in this region has been strategic partnerships and alliances. So that's why strategic partnerships and alliances. So this has been one major aspect of India's or India trying to improve its influence. Then, and that's why, as I said, that whether through defense or maritime cooperation or security cooperation or economic agreements, we have been trying to do all that to establish our presence in this particular area. And India also has been trying to engage with various global powers who also have vested interest in this particular area, whether United States or Japan or Australia. So that's why a forum like Quad becomes very, very crucial in this particular scenario. So the role of Quad becomes very crucial in balancing Chinese influence here. Then after that, we also have been trying to enhance our naval presence. Indian Navy has increased its presence in the Indian Ocean region with a very important emphasis on the maritime surveillance, joint exercises, and various patrolling operations that we have carried out in this particular area. India also has been trying to upgrade its naval capabilities, and which is also including various different types of new vessels and submarines, which also become a very crucial part of what India has been trying here. So that's why enhancing the naval presence also has been a very significant part of India's strategy. Enhanced naval presence. Alright, enhanced naval presence through various different activities. So here we have seen that we have tried doing anything that we can do to effectively monitor and respond to the developments that are happening in this particular area. Then after that, we also have been trying infrastructure development and providing economic aid to a lot of these countries. So for example, India has been actively involved in the infrastructure development projects, and there are initiatives that India has. For example, if you've heard of the security and growth for all the region called as the Sagar initiative or the Sagar doctrine. So that Sagar doctrine becomes very crucial in this particular scenario. So that's why infrastructure development. So in case of infrastructure development, remember the Sagar doctrine. So Sagar doctrine becomes very important. So Sagar stands for security and growth for all the region. Alright, so this is what Sagar doctrine stands for, and this has been trying to underscore India's commitment to using its capabilities for the benefit of this particular area. And there have been other such projects where we have seen that the developments that we have been doing in the Chabahar port in Iran, and same with regards to Maldives and everything that we have seen in Maldives. Then after that, the rail and the road links that we have been working on in Bangladesh, or the energy projects that we just discussed about Sri Lanka, they all have been a part of India's efforts in trying to counter China's Belt and Road Initiative. So that's why it becomes very, very crucial to understand this aspect. Then we also have been trying to build capacity and technical assistance in these kind of areas as well. We have been trying to help many of these countries, for example, including the training of the military personnel in these countries, or offering the scholarships in these countries, or providing disaster relief and also medical assistance to these countries. So that's why there have been a lot of, you can say, building of goodwill that we have tried to do in this kind of these areas. So that also we have been doing. We have been trying to enhance our bilateral ties also with these countries. So that's why you can say that in a manner we have been trying to build a goodwill in this particular we have been trying to build up a goodwill, better goodwill with all these countries which we have in these kind of areas. And then of course there are multilateral engagements also that India has been doing. We have seen that there are various fora, for example the Indian Ocean Rim Association, so that also has been a part of it. BIMSTEC is also where we have tried to be a part of it. Then Indian Ocean Naval Symposium is there. So they also, so there are all these multinational engagement or multilateral engagements also which have been a part of our efforts. So multilateral engagements. Multilateral engagements, where as I discussed that there is the Indian Ocean Rim Association. Indian Ocean Rim Association has been a big part of it. BIMSTEC is also a big part of it. And then after that Indian Ocean Naval Symposium also is Indian Ocean Naval Symposium is also a big part of it. So that's why there are various efforts that we have made in these areas. And of course apart from that there are diplomatic engagements also. We have seen that India has tried to address the concerns and build a trust with the neighbors, especially in the Indian Ocean areas. And that is where we see that sometimes it has also benefited in these kind of situations. Then we also have been trying to counterbalance Chinese investments. We have tried to offer grants and soft loans for critical projects in this area, and India, that's why, have been trying to become an alternative to the Chinese investments. where we see that a lot of cases that we have seen in the world, whether it is in the Asian countries or even in the African countries, we have seen that bad Chinese loans have been a big problem for many of the nations, and India, through its diplomatic engagements, also have been trying to make these countries also understand that what can potentially happen in these areas. So that's why we have been trying to counter Chinese investments. We have been trying to counter Chinese investments. So there are many things like these. Even you can count security and the defense cooperations that we have built with a lot of these nations. So that also can become a very crucial thing in this entire scenario. So that's why we understand that there are various efforts being made by India in ensuring the stability of Indian Ocean region and maintaining its own presence in the Indian Ocean region. Then after that, we also have to understand the various aspects of why Indian Ocean region. What is the importance of Indian Ocean region? So we know that first and foremost, it becomes a very important strategic maritime route. We see that it is home to some of the world's busiest maritime routes, including the critical checkpoints that we have, the various straits that we have, various canals that we have. So all that also runs through this particular area. So that's why it becomes a very crucial region with regards to maritime trade, worldwide maritime trade, and then a lot of economic resources. For example, major fisheries that are present. At the same time, we know that there is a lot of untapped oil and natural gas reserves also which lie in this particular area. Then there are different types of minerals that can be found in this area. So that's why there are all these economic resources. Then this area also is significant from the perspective of naval dominance and security, where we see that it becomes a very key strategic theater for the naval dominance, and that's why it influences global power dynamics. And that's why not only the presence of India or presence of China, you'll see that presence of other countries also become very crucial in this particular scenario, and how US has been trying to play a role, or Australia or Japan have been trying to play a role in this kind of an area becomes very crucial. So whether we talk about the regional powers or whether you talk about the other actors, extra regional actors, they all have been playing a major role. Then regional cooperation is again one major aspect of Indian Ocean region. We have seen that there have been various associations which have been trying to promote sustainable economic development and maritime security, and at the same time cultural cooperation as well. And then after that, then climate change and environmental aspects also have to be understood, that we see that Indian Ocean plays a very critical role in global climate patterns as well. So that's why whether it is monsoon systems or the maritime ecosystems, we see that they do play a very important role. We see that there are various issues which also happen in the Indian Ocean region, whether you talk about overfishing or you talk about the coral bleaching, marine pollution. All these things are things which need collective action, and that collective action also is where India can play a big role. And then of course we see that it plays a very important demographic role as well, and it has a very important demographic significance, that all the countries that are surrounding the Indian Ocean region are, you can say, they are home to very significant proportion of world's population. They contribute to the region's very vast cultural diversity and economic potential. So that's why we have to understand the demographic trends and how the developmental challenges in these kind of areas can have some kind of impact on the global issues such as migration or labor markets or the demand for resources, etc. So that's why there are a lot of aspects that we need to understand when it comes to the Indian Ocean region. Then there is another article on page number 8, and this is with regards to GS3, Environment and Ecology, India to establish international alliance to protect big cats. Now first we'll try to understand what do we mean by big cats. What do we mean by big cats? And then we'll try to understand some of the efforts. So the context of the article is this, that India is basically, or let's say the Environment Ministry plans to establish International Big Cat Alliance, very similar to how International Solar Alliance has worked. So globally, we want to create an alliance where we want participation of the countries which have the big cats. So all these can be called as big cats. You have lions or tigers, leopards, jaguars, cheetahs, cougars, and clouded leopards, snow leopards, etc. All they become a part of the big cat family. Now these big cat family, I mean big cats, basically they refer to the larger members of the uh, cat family, and this is where they are known for their power, their strength, their predatory skills. So that's why big cat is the name that has been given, and a term which is very commonly used to describe these kind of species. Now when it comes to these species, there are some species which are very crucial part of the big cat family, where first and foremost you have lion. Lion becomes a very crucial part of it. Then after that you have tiger. So lion, tiger, leopards, they become very crucial part of the big cat family. And apart from the panthers, you can say that there are these panthers that you have. All these collectively, they can be called as panthers. So these panthers, they become very important. So where do you have panthers? You have lions, tigers, leopards, and then jaguars, and then snow leopards. They can be called as panthers. They all can be called as panthers. So they actually become a part of the panther genus. And then apart from the panther genus, we see that there are some outside species also, which are also called as big cats, where you have species such as cheetahs. So cheetahs are not called as panthers. They are outside the panther genus, but they also are counted here. Then apart from that, you also have the cougars or puma, if you if you have heard of. So they also become a part of it. And then apart from that, you also have the clouded leopards, which are also counted. So overall, there are all these different species which are called as big cats. Now overall, when it comes to big cats, we have to again understand from ecological perspective where their role is. They play a very crucial role in the ecosystems. They have very significant cultural and economic and ecological importance as well. Their presence and their health also is a big indicator of biodiversity, big indicator of the health of an ecosystem. So that's why we see that there are a huge number of different roles that they play. So for example, they become the apex predators. They become the top predators in the food chain. And that's why they help in maintaining the balance of population between them and the prey species. So they would control the herbivore population, for example. They would ensure the diversity and the health of vegetation and the ecosystem at large. Then they become very important biodiversity indicators as well. The health of the big cats, the presence of the big cats in any given region very often is also seen as an indicator of the health of the ecosystem, because they need very large territories, they have very diverse habitats, and that's why they can if the conservation efforts are made, it helps them protect a very wide range of species which live in this particular area. Similarly, we have seen that they also have a lot of cultural and spiritual significance as well. We have seen that the big cats also have been playing a big role, have their significant place in mythology, in folklore, in a lot of national identities of various cultures as well. So that's why they play a big role there. Then they have a very important economic value. They help in ecotourism. They also attract visitors from national parks and wildlife reserves into the national parks and wildlife reserves. So they help in economic activities as well. They have an economic value as well. And then after that, they also are important from scientific and educational perspective. We see that they help us in better understanding of ecology, better understanding of conservation, and how the complexities of ecosystem management work. So they help us in all these aspects. Then they are also called as umbrella species. Very often they are called as umbrella species because why umbrella species? Because if you conserve these species, if you are conserving these species, automatically what happens is that it also serves as sanctuaries for many other organisms as well, thus acting as an umbrella for a lot of other animals and a lot of other plants. So that's why they help in biodiversity conservation in that particular scenario. That's why I understand the importance of umbrella species. For example, tiger is seen as one of the most important umbrella species, because once you conserve tigers, for example, let's say India has Project Tiger. So as a part of Project Tiger, we are conserving tigers, we are preserving tigers, tigers, but also their habitats. And their habitat conservation also means that we have to conserve the prey uh, populations as well. The ecosystems have to be maintained, the plant varieties have to be maintained. So the entire ecosystem benefits just because we wanted to conserve tigers. So that's why tigers are called as umbrella species. Then they also become genetic reservoirs. They are genetic reservoirs, that is, they contribute to the genetic diversity of ecosystems. And this diversity, it becomes very crucial for adapting to the challenging environment and the challenges that are posed by various diseases. So genetic diversity becomes very crucial, because if, let's say, a disease is affecting one population or one species or one set of genes, the other set of genes and other population will be able to survive well. So that's why genetic diversity becomes very crucial here, and they play a big role in maintaining this genetic reservoir. And then they provide a lot of ecological or ecosystem services. They basically influence the structure and the distribution of their prey and all the other species, and that's why they play a big role in maintaining of these environments. They also help us in various aspects indirectly, whether it is carbon sequestration or maintaining soil fertility, or even in water purification. They play a very important role. So not directly, of course, but indirectly they play a very big role. So that's why we need to understand their importance and why we need to conserve these species altogether. Now coming to the smaller discussions that we need to have, the first is from the perspective of GS2, Center's housing scheme for tribal groups facing hurdles due to lack of accurate data. Here there are two things that I want you to know about. One, what it mentions about particularly vulnerable tribal groups, what are these groups, and then after that this particular scheme, that is PM Janjati Adivasi Nyay Maha Abhiyan. So these are the two things that we need to understand here. Now overall, when it comes to this particular scheme, this is an initiative that is aimed at providing or improving the housing for the particularly vulnerable tribal groups, and it is something which, according to this article, it is experiencing a setback due to simultaneous data collection and implementation approach, that both of the things are happening simultaneously, and that's why we see that we haven't been able to get to the required targets. The goal basically was to sanction 2.5 lakhs of nearly the 5 lakh houses, planned houses, by February 15th, but until now, as per the data in this particular article, only up to 1.59 lakh houses have been constructed, so have been approved. So that's why we see that this is where it is talking about a setback in this particular scheme. Now overall, so that's why this is basically the context of this article, that where we see that there is a setback that it is facing. Now what we need to understand is that what do we exactly mean by particularly vulnerable tribal groups, because this scheme focuses mainly on these groups. So we need to understand what are these groups. So largely there are 4 factors that the government relies on, and if these 4 factors are not in the favor of certain tribal groups, then they will be called as particularly vulnerable tribal groups. Now overall, when it comes to it, these are the 4 parameters: pre-agricultural level of technology, low level of literacy, economic backwardness, and declining or stagnant population. If these 4 factors are seen in any population of tribal groups, then they will be called as particularly vulnerable tribal groups. So that's why they become very crucial, because they are trying to identify the tribal groups which are more vulnerable among the tribal population in the country. Now when it comes to these particularly vulnerable tribal groups, we see that there are certain challenges that they are also facing. So for example, marginalization has been one of the major challenges being faced by particularly vulnerable tribal groups. And in these cases, what we have seen is that all these PVTDs, they have faced various problems, and many of these groups, because they have been living in isolation, away from population, away from, you can say, the other population, that's why we see that there are issues that they start facing. So that's why there have been various aspects of problems that we need to understand. So that's why marginalization, that very often they live in very remote and isolated areas, and that leads to social and economic marginalization as well. And their traditional ways of life and the cultural practices have been increasingly under threat because of the mainstream from the mainstream societies. Then land displacement, many of these groups, they are displaced from their ancestral lands due to development projects or due to deforestation or encroachment into their lands. So we have seen that there have been all these issues that they have been facing. Similarly, the lack of access to education and healthcare has been a major challenge. There has been a very limited access to quality education and healthcare facilities that are available for many of these groups. There are low literacy rates and a lack of awareness about health and sanitation, which also further makes their situation bad. And they also have been seen to be vulnerable to a lot of these diseases where otherwise there are solutions available. Then their economic vulnerability. Very often we see that these are groups which are dependent on primitive forms of agriculture, like even in cases of hunting and gathering for their livelihood. So here we see that they have very limited access to the market financing services. They struggle to improve upon their economic status altogether because of lack of awareness also in certain cases. Then we have seen nutritional deficiency and problem with food security as well. They largely, many of these groups, they depend on forest produce for their sustenance, and that's why with the shrinking forest cover and biodiversity, their food resources also are becoming increasingly scarce, and that's why this is leading to a lot of cases of malnutrition and health problems among these species, among these tribes. So that's why we see that in case of these tribes, especially the vulnerable tribes, they have been facing these kind of issues. And then there is a kind of cultural erosion also that we see in their case, that the rich cultural heritage and the traditional knowledge of these groups, they are also at a risk due to the influence of globalization, modernization, etc. Preserving their language, preserving their arts and rituals, it becomes a big challenge for them in the face of rapid social changes that have been, or societal changes that have been happening all across. And then environmental degradation also becomes a big challenge because of deforestation, mining, increasing pollution and threats to their habitats. We have seen that the traditional livelihoods which are based on the forest ecosystems, they are under threat for them. So that's why we need to understand all these things. So this is the scheme that we are discussing here, the Pradhan Mantri Janjati Adivasi Nyay Mahabhiyan. Now in this particular case, here there are a lot of initiatives that we have. There are a set of 11 initiatives that have been listed by the Government of India as a part of this scheme. So as you can see that these are all these schemes. You can just pause and just look at it. I don't think that directly they will be important for your examination, but you should just know that this is what it is, that these are the 11 areas of concern which they are going to target upon. So you can just pause and just have a look at it once. Otherwise, I wouldn't say that it is important directly for your examination. Know the overview. You don't need to know the details. US drones sail to India, progress to the next stage. This is again a small article where we need to understand about this one trade happening between India and US. MQ-9B high altitude long endurance armed unmanned aerial vehicles or UAVs. So what exactly are these? Let's try to understand this. The context is that the potential sale of these 31 UAVs by General Atomics to India has advanced to the next stage. This is the context. Now we don't really need to know a lot of things here, but overall what exactly is this MQ-9B high altitude long endurance armed UAV? This is what we need to understand about and what exactly it is. So just some of the facts related to it. So first, it is manufactured by General Atomics Aeronautics System, and then it is a part of the family which is remotely piloted aircraft system that are used for surveillance, reconnaissance and then strike missions. Overall, they have very long duration flights. They are capable of staying airborne for more than 40 hours. They can remain airborne for 40 hours, and they can operate at altitudes of up to 40,000 feet, and that they are also capable of carrying various different types of weapons, which are, whether it is precision guided bombs or missiles, they can actually carry all these. So that is what the significance is, and now we see that India, between India and US, this is now moving to the next stage, because it also had come under controversy, because when there was the controversy about Indian government's involvement in the plot to kill, assassinate Khalistani separatist. In that case also we saw that there was some issue that happened between India and the US, but now we see that we have moved beyond that, and now this is moving to the next stage. Then apart from that, the next article that we have here is with regards to El Nino. Now El Nino again has been in the news, we have been discussing about this, and this time the news says that India will see a warmer summer as El Nino conditions continue. Now overall, when it comes to El Nino conditions, this is basically where we understand about El Nino, and a phenomena where we see a departure from a basic weather pattern, the basic weather pattern that in a normal year that we see, where we see that if you see in a normal year, the equatorial winds will gather the warm water pool towards the western side of the Pacific, and the cold water along the South American coast. But here in this case we see that in case of an El Nino year, we see that an easterly winds will be weakened, and warm water will move towards east, and that's why we'll see that there will be warmer winter that will be seen in the US areas. But at the same time, it does have a negative impact on India's summer as well, and that's why we see that warmer Indian summers are seen in case of El Nino years. So that is what this article talks about, that in case of El Nino, we understand that El Nino is going to have a negative impact on India's climate this year, and summers are going to be warmer this year as compared to the normal summers. Now overall, when it comes to El Nino, we do understand that El Nino plays a big role whenever there is these kind of instances. Now over the past few years, what we have seen is that the instances, or past few decades, let me say this, that over the past couple of decades we have seen that the occurrences of El Nino has started to increase. The number of years of El Nino years have been have started to increase. It used to be every 2 to 7 years. We have seen that now their occurrences are far more often than they used to be. So that's why this becomes a major challenge for the world, not only for India. And for India also, we do see that the occurrences of summer will be very, very hot. It can lead to drought related situations. It can lead to water shortages all across the country. So there are these problems that we need to understand with regards to El Nino, and hence this becomes a big problem for India. And then lastly, an article related to GS paper 3, Center signs 5 contracts to procure arms and ammunition worth 39,125 crores. So here there are three aspects that we have to understand. One has been about MiG-29. One has been about MiG-29. Now in case of MiG-29, we know that this is something that has been made by the Soviets, and that has been provided to India as well, and India also uses MiG-29. So overall, it is a twin engine jet fighter aircraft which has been designed by the Soviet Union, and this is something that was initially designed to counter the American F-15 and the F-16 fighter aircrafts. And now that India also has it, and we know that there are various different kinds of MiG aircrafts that India has been training on for a very long time. Then after that, we have the close-in weapon system. This is the second part of the discussion in this article, and this close-in weapon system is a point defense system for detecting and destroying incoming missiles, aircrafts and sea threats, especially at a low or a very short range. So overall, what we see is that this is largely something that is used in the oceans, that it will be fitted with the naval capacity of a country, and India also now has been looking towards building of the close-in weapon system. So that was the second part of this particular deal. and the third one has been about the BrahMos missile. We know that we have been working on BrahMos missile, we have been testing BrahMos missile for a while now, and BrahMos missile become a very crucial part of India's defense mechanism. So here also we see that it plays a major role, and we see that in case of BrahMos missile, which is among the fastest cruise missile of the world, has a very important significance for India's defense. So overall, that's why this BrahMos missile becomes very important. Why we are saying that one of the fastest cruise missiles? Because the first version of BrahMos has a speed of up to Mach 2.8. Now Mach 2.8 means that the speed is up to 2.8 times the speed of sound, which is unknown for cruise missiles. Cruise missiles generally are very slow. They work in subsonic speeds, but this time we see that we have a cruise missile that has a supersonic capacity, and now we are also building BrahMos 2, or the BrahMos next generation, where the speed will be even higher than this. The speed can go beyond 4 Mach and up to even 5 Mach. So that's why up to 4.5 Mach to be exact. So that's why we see that there are all these developments which are happening in case of BrahMos missiles as well. Now at the end, to look at couple of questions from the mains perspective. Examine the strategic importance of Indian Ocean region in global geopolitics and analyze the measures taken by India to counterbalance Chinese influence. So we discussed various aspects of what is this Indian Ocean region, why is it important, what is India doing. We took examples as well. So we discussed all these things. So you just have to mention all those points as we discussed in the lecture. And then lastly, discuss the challenges faced in the conservation of Indian leopards and analyze the effectiveness of conservation methods implemented to address these challenges, and suggest methods to enhance the conservation efforts in the country. So first, all the issues that you have, all the challenges that we have, what can India do, what are the projects that we are already taking, and what is the future course of action. So education also becomes a big part of it, better policy implementation becomes a big part of it. So we have to write about all these things in this particular question. So that brings us to the end of today's lecture. I hope this lecture helps. Please go back and revise everything from the perspective of examination. And this is end for today's lecture. Thank you very much for joining.